The country road was barely distinguishable from the surrounding swamp. My new high-heeled boots, which I had bought just before moving to the village, were now more mud than leather. I grimaced as I tried to pull my feet out of the thick, sucking mire with every step, but the task seemed to only make things worse. My frustrations escaped in muttered curses and helpless sighs. Why did I think this was a good idea? I grumbled to myself, clutching the large bag slung over my shoulder. The weight of it, combined with the muddy terrain, was making the journey feel like a never-ending ordeal. I glanced at the piece of paper in my hand, which had my new address written on it. I wasn't sure if I was heading in the right direction. The map I had printed out was now a crumpled mess in my bag. As if to mock my misfortune, a car approached, kicking up a spray of mud as it drove. I squinted through the splattered grime on my glasses to see a young man behind the wheel. He slowed down and leaned out of the window. "Hey there. Need a lift?" His voice was friendly, though slightly muffled by the distance. I was irritated and tired. "No, thanks. I can manage," I snapped, though deep down I knew I was barely managing. I felt a pang of regret as the car sped off, sending a fresh wave of mud splattering over me. "Great. Just what I needed," I muttered, brushing the mud off my face. I finally found a log on the side of the road and sat down, feeling utterly defeated. The sky was overcast, and the cold seeped through my thin coat. I started to cry, the mascara I had applied earlier now streaking down my cheeks. Suddenly, the car from earlier came to a stop again. I wiped my eyes and tried to compose myself as the driver approached. He had an apologetic look on his face. "I'm really sorry about before," he said, his tone earnest. "I didn't mean to make things worse. I'm Nicholas, and I really do want to help. Can I give you a ride?" I was still annoyed but was too exhausted to argue further. "Well, if you insist. I could use some help." I handed him the crumpled piece of paper with my new address on it. Nicholas studied the paper for a moment and then smiled. "All right, let's get you out of this mess. I'm heading that way anyway." He moved with surprising efficiency, opening the passenger door for me and taking my bag. "Get in," he said with a reassuring grin. "Don't worry about the dirt. I'll get it cleaned up later." Relieved but still self-conscious, I gingerly climbed into the car, trying not to leave any more mud behind. Nicholas started the engine and we drove off. The warmth inside the car was a welcome contrast to the chill of the swampy air outside. I glanced over at him, feeling a mix of gratitude and curiosity. "You didn't have to come back. Thanks for helping." Nicholas shrugged, his eyes flicking to the road before us. "No problem. I saw you were in trouble and thought I should do something. Besides, I've seen how tough this road can be. I wouldn't want anyone else struggling through it." We traveled in comfortable silence for a while, the steady hum of the engine and the occasional rumbles of the road the only sounds. When we reached my new home, Nicholas pulled up in front of a small, modest house that looked like it had seen better days. He got out and helped me with my bags, setting them down on the porch. "Well, here we are," he said. "If you need anything, my mother's bathhouse is always available. It's heated, so it might be a nice relief after your trek." I hesitated, glancing at the dust-covered front of my new house. "I might take you up on that offer." "Thanks, Nicholas. I'll be okay for now." Nicholas gave a friendly nod. "All right. Just come over if you change your mind. And if you need help with anything else, don't hesitate to ask." As he drove away, I watched him go, feeling a small sense of relief and a tinge of curiosity about this unexpected yet kind stranger. I took a deep breath and prepared myself to face the challenges of settling into my new home. The inside of the house was a far cry from the cozy retreat I had imagined. The air was stale, and a thick layer of dust coated every surface. As I walked through the small living area, I realized just how poorly maintained the place was. The furniture looked like it hadn't been used in years, and cobwebs hung from the corners of the ceiling. My spirits sank further when I discovered the bathroom situation. I turned on the faucet, hoping for a refreshing stream of water, but was greeted by only a trickle of brownish liquid. I sighed heavily, feeling a mixture of frustration and exhaustion. My first day in the village had been a series of misfortunes, and this seemed to be the final straw. Deciding that I needed a break from the dismal surroundings, I wrapped myself in a blanket and made a list of things I needed to buy to make the place more livable. Just as I was about to head out in search of some basic supplies, a knock on the door startled me. I opened it to find Mrs. Chambers, Nicholas's kindly neighbor, standing there with a warm smile. Her presence was a welcome distraction from my growing list of complaints. "Hello, dear," she greeted cheerfully. "I'm Mrs. Chambers. I heard you might be in need of a bath. Our bathhouse is heated and ready if you'd like to use it." I was taken aback by her generosity. "Oh, that's very kind of you. I was actually struggling with the water situation here. I'd really appreciate it." Mrs. Chambers waved her hand dismissively. "Don't mention it. We've all been in that situation before. Just follow me, and we'll get you sorted out." I followed her down a narrow path to a separate building behind her house. The bathhouse was a charming structure with a neatly painted exterior and a warm, inviting glow emanating from the windows. The contrast between this and my own dismal abode was striking. Inside, the bathhouse was clean and modern, with fresh towels neatly hung and a soothing steam rising from the large, well-maintained bathtub. The warmth was a relief against the chill that had settled into my bones. I slipped into the bath and let out a contented sigh as the hot water enveloped me. After my bath, I emerged feeling like a new person. Mrs. Chambers had prepared a simple but delicious dinner: roast chicken, vegetables, and freshly baked bread. As I sat down to eat, she continued to be a picture of kindness and hospitality. "So, how are you finding the village so far?" Mrs. Chambers asked as she served me another helping of bread. "It's certainly different from the city," I admitted. "I didn't expect the roads to be so rough, and the house needs a lot of work. But I guess that's all part of the adventure." Mrs. Chambers nodded sympathetically. "Oh, it can be a bit of a shock at first. But you'll get used to it. We all did. And if you need any help with the house or just someone to chat with, you can always count on the folks around here." I appreciated her words of comfort. "Thank you, Mrs. Chambers. I'm really grateful for your help and for making me feel so welcome." "It's my pleasure," she replied warmly. "We all look out for each other here. Nicholas mentioned you were new, and he thought you might need a hand. He's quite the helper, isn't he?" I couldn't help but smile at the mention of Nicholas. "Yes, he's been very kind. He gave me a ride and even offered to help me with other things." Mrs. Chambers's eyes twinkled with understanding. "Nicholas is a good soul. He's always willing to lend a hand. I'm glad you're getting along with him." As the evening wore on, I felt a sense of comfort and belonging that had been elusive since my arrival. Mrs. Chambers's hospitality had brightened my spirits and made the daunting task of settling into my new life a bit easier. By the time I left her home, I felt more optimistic. The warmth and kindness I had experienced from Mrs. Chambers were a reminder that, despite the challenges ahead, there were good people here who were ready to help. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of adjustment and discovery. Nicholas's frequent visits to help with various tasks around my house had become a comforting routine. Whether it was fixing leaky faucets, repairing broken windows, or simply sharing a cup of coffee, his presence brought a welcome sense of normalcy to my otherwise chaotic life. One crisp autumn afternoon, I was in the middle of reorganizing the cluttered kitchen when I heard a knock on the door. I opened it to find Nicholas standing there, holding a box of tools and a friendly smile. "Hi there. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd check in. I heard the door was sticking a bit. Mind if I take a look?" Nicholas asked, his eyes twinkling with genuine interest. "Sure, come on in," I replied, stepping aside to let him in. "I've been meaning to get around to it, but you know how things are." He set down the box and moved to the door, examining the hinges and frame with a practiced eye. As he worked, I couldn't help but admire how efficiently he handled each task. His focus and skill were impressive, but it was his easygoing manner and the way he engaged in conversation that truly captured my attention. "You know, I was surprised how quickly you adapted to village life," I said, leaning against the counter. "Most people would have been overwhelmed by all this." Nicholas glanced up, wiping his hands on a rag. "I guess I've always been one for challenges. And besides, I like helping people. It's rewarding in its own way." I smiled, touched by his sincerity. "I'm really grateful for all your help. It's made a big difference." Nicholas's gaze softened, and he looked at me with an intensity that made my heart skip a beat. "I'm glad to hear that. I've enjoyed spending time with you. You've been a good friend to me." The conversation lingered, and I found myself increasingly drawn to him. Our interactions became more frequent, and our conversations more intimate. I began to look forward to his visits with a mix of anticipation and excitement. One evening, Nicholas and I were sitting on the porch, enjoying a cup of tea after another round of repairs. The sky was painted with the soft hues of twilight, and a gentle breeze rustled the autumn leaves. "So, how's everything going with Irvin?" Nicholas asked casually, though there was an underlying note of curiosity in his voice. I hesitated, feeling a pang of guilt. "Irvin and I are okay. But it's different. There's a distance between us that wasn't there before. I don't know how to explain it." Nicholas nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes, distance can reveal things we might not have noticed before. It's not easy to navigate those feelings." I looked at him, my emotions tangled. "You've been so supportive. I don't know what I would have done without you." Nicholas's eyes met mine, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. "I'm just glad I could be here for you. It means a lot to me." As the days went by, the bond between us grew stronger. We spent more time together, whether it was working on the house, exploring the village, or simply enjoying each other's company. Nicholas's charm and genuine nature began to seep into my heart, and I found myself thinking about him even when he wasn't around. One chilly morning, Nicholas stopped by with a basket of freshly picked apples. He handed me the basket with a grin. "Thought you might like some fresh produce. The apples are really crisp this time of year." "Thank you," I said, taking the basket with a smile. "They look wonderful. I'll make a pie with them." Nicholas's eyes lingered on mine, and he seemed to hesitate for a moment before speaking. "Edna, I want you to know that I really enjoy our time together. It's more than just helping out. I care about you." His words sent a thrill through me, but I struggled with the confusion of my feelings. "Nicholas, Before I could respond, he gently interrupted. "I understand if you need time to sort things out. I just wanted you to know how I feel." As he left, I was left to grapple with the depth of my emotions. I knew that Nicholas was special, but I also felt trapped by my engagement to Irvin. The growing affection I had for Nicholas was undeniable, and it left me with a mixture of joy and uncertainty. Each interaction with Nicholas seemed to deepen my feelings, and I began to realize that I was falling for him in a way I had never anticipated. My heart was caught between duty and desire, and I knew that I had to make a decision about my future. If you like this story, please subscribe, like, click the bell, and leave a comment. Thank you in advance.